Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The attempted lynching of Dave Chappelle continues, however raggedly, and this time they sent the root to do it. Talk about the wrong tool for the job. You know, I used to call them the weed, but one of my Twitter subs, Jay Jerkin, said call them the rot. And I gotta admit, that's a lot better, so I give that brother the credit for coming up with that one. Now, understand, white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the argument. Your so-called black media that have been running around saying that they spoke for the people for the last 60 or 70 years. Up until this point, they've been nothing more than a collection of white corporate fronts, bootlick meat puppets saying what their white owners told them to say. Now, the first thing to know about the Root is they're not black owned. They're owned by a white company, GO Media. That's G/O Media. That's Gizmodo / The Onion. I wish I was making that up. GO Media's homepage lists their so-called values, and they make sure to mention diversity and inclusion. Well, you look at their corporate board, you look at the company's leadership. This look diverse to you? This is monochromatic. GO Media thinks that diversity and inclusion stops at their doorstep, and this is who owns the rot. By the way, they also own Jezebel, and they got some sort of partnership with Not Very Smart Brothers. Those clowns were the ones who came up with that stupid article back in the day, that clickbait crap about black men are the white people of black society. This is who GO Media makes sure they give a platform to. And what do you get from GO Media? What you get is your so-called black media outlets, pretend phony black media. These guys are running around doing nothing but LGBT advocacy. These guys understand that black people in general and black heterosexual men in specific are sanctioned targets. So the kind of anti-black male bashing and hating that you saw coming from other toilet rags like Black Enterprise and Essence and others, well, you got it coming from the Root too. These guys are online as far as they're concerned. If they can just pretend to be for black folks, there'll be a few gullible chuckleheads who go for it. But over here in B1, we ain't falling for the okie doke. And yes, these guys are doing blatant, obvious clickbait. They're saying something that they know people are going to look at and go, are you guys smoking crack? Actually, we smoke meth. But that's what they're posting here. Dave Chappelle's fall from grace is no laughing matter. Actually, Dave Chappelle's laughing all the way to the bank. Fall from grace? Yeah, to them, having approval from white supremacists, that's akin to getting a blessing from God. So no wonder they would call it grace. I'm in a state of grace. These white supremacists at GO Media, they love me. That fall from grace. Dave Chappelle's making more money than God right now. And he is the biggest comedian on the planet. If you're stupid enough to call that a fall from grace, then clearly you have no clue which way is up. Well, that makes sense if you work over at the Rot. Now, the big bugaboo that these clowns have had as they did their little clickbait trash article was, even the comedian's high school is distancing itself from him. That's what they actually printed. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dave Chappelle's high school was Duke Ellington School of the Arts in D.C. That's where he's from. And what had happened was he was taking part in a fundraiser, or at least he was supposed to. But you had one or two students who said, we're going to walk out. These are clowns looking for attention so they can post on Facebook. Look at me. They mentioned me on the nightly news. This is a high point of my life. That's what happened there. You had a couple of students who apparently said, this Dave Chappelle guy, he makes me feel bad. Does he really make you feel bad? If that's the only way I can get you guys to talk about me, yeah, I'll say about him. Yeah, I'll go ahead and attack him if that's the only way to get you guys to notice me. That's what's happening here. So what the school said was that they were going to postpone the fundraiser, and they also said that they were going to be naming a theater after Dave Chappelle. Now, these clowns who did this little attention whoring stunt and the fools over at the Rot, they're claiming Dave Chappelle's high school is distancing itself from them. Well, it just goes to show that the white supremacists, they send that kind of propaganda and asinine foolery. They send that to you and me. But when it comes time for the white supremacists to get their news, just the same way that they don't listen to idiots like Thomas Sowell, they don't take his word for anything because they know he's not to be taken seriously. He's one of their puppets, so they don't listen to him. The same thing goes for clowns like the Rot and the Griot. They don't listen to them. If you want an example of the kind of thing that they do listen to, all you have to do is take a look at the open, no pun intended, openly LGBT advocacy website, LGBTQ Nation, and what they put up was a different story. It said Dave Chappelle's alma mater reschedules, but they still move forward with naming the theater after him. That's what they said. And then for the subheading, it says, the Duke Ellington School of the Arts believes that by rejecting cancel culture, but showing students they should balance creative freedom with protecting the rights and dignity of others, they can have a teachable moment. So over at the Rot, they're trying to score Zaddy points by saying, look, Zaddy, we attacking this black man. We taking him to task. We getting him, Zaddy. We getting him, Zaddy. Meanwhile, you got the white folks over at LGBTQ Nation saying, hey, Dave Chappelle, his high school, they're going to go forward with naming a theater after him after all. They're not trying to psychologically masturbate. Instead, they're pointing out, dang, we thought we took that nigger down. It didn't work. Yeah, now who do you think the white supremacists are going to be actually taking their news and views from? The Rot? Who was one of their puppets who's just going to say whatever they think Zaddy wants to hear, or one of their own who's going to point out, we thought that we were stopping that nigger, we thought that we were going to shame him out of existence, and instead, people aren't backing away from him, they're backing up to him. That's what's happening, and they know it. But the fact that they're still deciding, we're going to see if there's any mileage to be gotten out of attacking Dave Chappelle, what that shows you is he shook them to their core. Regardless of what you may think of Dave Chappelle's personal life or who it is he chooses to snuggle up with, you can't deny the fact that at the end of the day, he's still a black man in America. And he's a black man who publicly flogged one of the white media's major corporations, did it publicly. And then he forced the bastards to their knees. As he put it, he got his name back, got his license back, and forced them to pay him millions of dollars, some of them back taxes, that Comedy Central owed him. Yeah, you got a black man who flogs white people. He punished them for displeasing him. And so what they did was they decided, we need to see if we can find some. It can't be a bunch of straight white males. Let's see if we can find some of these racist white male LGBTs over here, and they're going to attack Dave Chappelle as our proxies. That's what the game was. And Dave Chappelle made it clear, ain't backing down, ain't backing up. And they're scared that this might put a spine to some of these other black folks, not other black folks in entertainment. By the time you've gotten to the point where you got the white media giving you a paycheck, you're depending on them for every crumb of your daily bread, you've cultivated no other skills. So it's not as if there's going to be a groundswell of black celebrities who suddenly get their linguini spines suddenly turn to something resembling bone. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen is that others will become emboldened. Dave Chappelle has shown that his money is fine, and he gets to say what's on his mind. The concert venues are still filling up for him. And all of this anti-black hatred and vitriol, it's turning out to be a paper tiger. If you stand up, that is. Not every comedian aspires to be Hannibal Buress. Hell, even Hannibal Buress doesn't want to be Hannibal Buress. Tiffany Haddish is a has-been. All these feckless, shameless professional butt kissers, and all they've gotten is a little bit of make work for humiliating themselves. But when the white media looks and goes, your usefulness is expended, we're not going to get anything out of you, they throw you away because that's what they always do with their tools. But this, the Rot, this is what the flea-infested homeless minions over there do. They try to paint their own reality by writing this asinine fiction. Now, as I've always taught you, whenever you see these clowns, these little bootlicks running around, trashing, attacking black people, that's a Negro who's looking for a white audience. And if you want further proof of that, you need look no further than Diane Belton. Diane Belton used to be the editor-in-chief of The Root. Editor-in-chief. Oh my, be still my beating heart. So she was the one who was in charge of that little dumpster fire for 5 whole years, huh? Now, instead of staying there and deciding to build something, what does she do? She jumped ship first chance she got. Far as she was concerned, I'll write some articles trashing black men, I'll be pushing the alphabet agenda, and I'll have a white media job in no time. And that's exactly what she went and did. She wasn't trying to build anything because she doesn't know how to build. And obviously, she didn't even want to be at the very place that she was running. So if the person who was running the rot didn't want to be there, you know, the rest of them fools who were lower on the chain, actually, they're all basically on the same level, the gutter level. There's no real hierarchy there. But if the woman who was running that place didn't want to be there, then you already know everybody else there doesn't want to be there either. They're all just trying to figure out, how do I get noticed by some white website or maybe I can get myself some minor gig working at some TV station or something. That's how you get clowns like Amber Phillips and Jamila LaPuke going on the breakfast schlubs, trying to figure out how to hustle themselves a job working for them. You guys really need some feminists who can give the feminist perspective. And they were like, no, we already have enough empty-headed morons. We got Angela Rye with lettuce and tomatoes on the side. And hell, when they want to know what the female perspective is, that's what they got Charlemagne the Fraud and DJ Penis Envy for. It don't get much more feminine than that. But this is what happens to those bootlicks first time they think they get a chance to jump ship. That's what they do. They try to hustle their way from one gig to the next, or in many of their cases, they're just desperately trying to find one. All she cared about was the rot was going to be nothing more than a resume enhancer for her. It was going to be nothing more than something she could use to prove her worthiness so that when a real job came along from one of these white media spots that she really wanted to be at. Yeah, the root, that was just something to do until a white media gig came along. She wanted to get out of that little old media ghetto that she was in and make her way into the big leagues. And that's what she went and did. This is the game. This is what it's about. Doesn't matter if it's Simone Mammy Sanders, or if it's Hannibal Buress, or if it's Danielle Belton or whomever. All these Negroes that you see carrying water for the white media, trashing black folks, and carrying the anti-black line, they're all doing it just so they can try to get a job. That's it. They'll tell any lie, push any falsehood, suppress any truth if they can manage it. But since nobody listens to them, they ain't very good at that. But you know, when it comes to trashing black folks and just pushing a straight alphabet line, preferably at our expense, the rot is not alone. Recently, you had Zerlina. I told you about her. The rot was naming her as one of their 100 most influential African Americans. And just to show that these clowns all operate out of the same playbook for the same masters, Zerlina, on her little side show on MSNBC, she was using it as a Trojan horse to go ahead and push the intersectionalist alphabet feminine line. She pretended like she was going to discuss the Rittenhouse trial and race. That's what it was said. That's what the chyron on the screen said, Rittenhouse and race. And then she brought on some heifer I never even heard of, who used to work in the Obama administration on a so-called policing task force. Well, we can all see what came of that. Well, this Obama-era shill, she came on and she just couldn't stop herself from spewing the feminine talking points.
And joining me now is MSNBC political analyst Brittany Packnett Cunningham. She's a former member of President Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force. What do you make of the rise in white vigilante violence, which is, I think, how we can categorize these cases?
Well, we actually need to be talking about the inevitable outcomes of a culture of white supremacist patriarchy that depends on violence. You know, bell hooks would consistently remind us that we cannot separate patriarchy from white supremacy, from heteronormativity, from all of these kind of dominant structures. We know that white supremacist patriarchy will continuously depend and rely on violence to maintain and create the social order that it prefers, which means that anyone who has an identity whose existence actually flies in the face of that, black folks, brown folks, LGBTQ people, disabled people, etc., or anyone whose politics would demand equity for all of us, that those folks stand in the way of the social order they prefer.
Did you, get all that? This woman was just a Caesar word salad of crazy. She just took all the stupid terms she learned in her gender studies class and strung them along in a sentence. I mean, she actually had the nerve to mention bell hooks as if this is somebody we should take seriously. I'm sitting here going, God dang, you might as well have said Bozo the Clown. I take Barney the Dinosaur more seriously than bell hooks. I mean, you know somebody's down to their last brain cell when they're word-dropping bell hooks. The issue, family, is white supremacy. Specifically anti-black racism, full stop. We ain't waving the flag for any, well, it's about everything you see. It's about LGBT and brown folks and handicapped folks and one-eyed, one-horned, blind, purple people eaters. This is what Claude Anderson talked about. Every time it's time to talk about black folks, they always make sure, we're going to shoehorn everyone in there. And of course, if the issue is attacking everyone, if it's an issue that applies to everyone, that means it applies to no one. It's not about patriarchy or heteronormativity or any other made-up words. These are just empty fluff, just a bunch of hot air fed to black feminists by the white women who they wished they could be. And it's done for the sake of getting us to take our focus off of white supremacy. Because as long as we're talking about patriarchy and heteronormativity, we're not talking about how we're going to punish all these white supremacists in the streets. Kyle Rittenhouse's mother taught him anti-black racism. She's the one who took him to the gun range. She's the one who stood by him when he assaulted a white teenage girl last July. Rittenhouse's mother armed him. Rittenhouse's mother drove him to the rally where he committed a mass shooting. And by the way, in all of these cases of white vigilantes, how many of them were going after gay people? Is that why Rittenhouse went to Kenosha? He went to Kenosha because he heard there was some LGBT advocacy going on. He went to Kenosha because he heard there were going to be some transgender bathrooms. Is that what it was? Oh, he heard about there was going to be an ADA ramp built so that people in wheelchairs could get onto sidewalks easier. Is that why he went there? Because after all, it's about handicapped people, right? Oh, he heard there was going to be an English as a second language school opening up in Kenosha, right? Because we're talking about all those brown people and all this other garbage going on. How many courts have been letting people off scot-free for harming a trans person or a disabled person? Have you heard of any judges who have called themselves applauding witnesses who take to the stand to defend someone accused of harming a trans person? You heard of any judges who have said that trans person who got beat up or shot, you can't refer to them as victims? Is that what happened? Have we heard of that happening to any trans people? Any LGBTQ people? Come on. I mean, after all, it's about all of these things, right? Not just black people. I mean, because black people aren't being singled out, you see. It's white supremacy's at war with everyone. And if it's a war with everyone, that means it's not a war with anybody. Rittenhouse wasn't out there with an assault rifle because he was angry about LGBT people who were standing up for themselves. He was angry about black people who were charging white supremacists like himself a price for practicing white supremacy. And he had been mad ever since July 1st when those two black teenagers stopped him from assaulting that white girl. July 1st, 2020 was when he assaulted that white girl at his high school. And then what happened was, a few weeks later, he got caught on video saying on those protesters, if I wish I had my AR-15, I'd take shots at them. And then a couple of weeks later, he found the first protest with black folks that he could find. He drove 30 miles to get there, and this time he took his AR-15 with him. Didn't have a damn thing to do with intersectionalism or patriarchy or heteronormativity. But you have these fools who want to pretend as if they're going to be feminists, and they're nothing but meat puppets for white feminists. That's all they are. That's all the Zerlinas and the Tiffany Cross-Eyes are. Many of them want a zaddy. Many of them identify as LGBT because in their minds, if they just tell the world, I'm LGBT, then hopefully they can escape being black, because that for them is what the end game is supposed to be. They're going to be just saying that they're LGBT and waving the rainbow flag hard as they can. And what they're really trying to say is, don't attack me. Don't hurt me. I am distancing myself from blackness. See, I'm no threat to you. I know the threat is black and it's not LGBT. So see, I'm no threat to you. I disavow blackness. I'm no threat to you. That's what they think they're saying. That's what they think they're doing. Black people are being murdered with impunity simply because we exist. And you have the media, you have the courts, the politicians, and numerous corporations and rich people who the Danielle Bentons and the Tiffany Cross-Eyes and the Zerlinas and others want to work for, who are aiding and abetting this genocide. Black people are not being killed because of anything we do in the bedroom or any other place. We're being killed just because we exist. Nobody defames and demonizes LGBT people who are harmed. There's absolutely nobody in the media who brings up a string of LGBT identifying people being harmed and then tries to create a narrative that, well, they had it coming somehow. You don't see anybody trying to justify harming LGBT people. So there is no comparison. But that's exactly what this Zerlina clown tried to do. She tried to make a comparison that doesn't exist. All these sorry Negroes you see on these white cable networks that you see working at the Rot and other places, all these fools are just looking for a job. I mean, you're sitting here thinking to yourself, how do we get black empowerment? The only thing these morons are thinking of is, how do I get gainful employment? If you're on cable and such, for them, the highest rung of the ladder for the Zerlinas and such is the White House. Or if they can get themselves some sort of consulting gig for a big white corporation. You know, kind of like James Clyburn's worthless little spawn, Mignon Clyburn. She's working for some of those communications companies that she was supposed to be regulating back in the day when she was on the FCC. Now she was on the FCC, supposed to be regulating these guys. Now she's got herself high-paying jobs consulting for them. Well, I guess that explains why she didn't punish them or do anything to hold them to account when she was on the FCC. I guess that explains it now, don't it? Simone Mammy Sanders, she was one of those talking heads on cable, and she promised Biden that she would be his willing crash dummy. If anybody brings up the 94 crime bill that Biden wrote, why, Simone Mammy Sanders would play linebacker for him, and she'd run interference and say, well, you can't really blame Joe Biden for the last 25 years of mass incarceration. Why, that's the state's. It's the state's fault. And her reward? She got a job with the administration in the basement. But guess what? Roly-Poly Martin, he's been drooling at the mouth ever since. And you know there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't tell himself, if Miss Hillary had won the presidency, that would be me. It ain't fair. Simone goes to the White House, and I only made it to the Waffle House. So don't ever let any of these sock puppets for white supremacy take your eye off the square. You need to know what it is they're doing, but you always need to keep in mind why they're doing it. How dare this Zerlina clown try to water down the fight against white supremacy by shoehorning everybody else into the conversation? She should have stopped that clown from the Obama administration as soon as he started talking. But of course, she's not going to do that because that's the entire reason they brought him on. They have their producers and said, you know, they got their little list of cronies. They already know what these fools are going to say. So, of course, she wasn't going to stop her. She brought her on specifically to do that, to dissipate the energy. Let's go ahead and start this narrative that why it's everyone who's being threatened here, not just black people. So we don't need to worry about all these black people who the white supremacists are getting away with killing. Why? We need to just make sure that we're looking out for the LGBT and the immigrants and looking out for disabled people and everybody except for black folks. That's a standard white supremacist tactic. Once you allow them to introduce the lie that everyone's being targeted by white supremacy, then you no longer have to focus on black people because, after all, black people are no worse off than LGBT people and handicapped people and women and brown people and one-eye, one-horn, blind, purple people eaters. As long as black folks are no better off or no worse than them, well, we don't need to prioritize black folks. So let's talk about immigration and transgender bathrooms and the price of rice in China, because that's how you fight the patriarchy. Problem is, that's not how you fight white supremacy. And it's white supremacy that's the problem. After all, it was 2 white men who Rittenhouse murdered in Kenosha. What about the patriarchy for them? They would be the very embodiment of the patriarchy. So why were they killed? They were killed because of the fact that they were actually objecting, or at least seemed to be objecting, perceived to be objecting to the harming of black people. That's why they died and no other reason. This is the white media switcheroo. Get a black person to do the rhetorical rope-a-dope. You start off your segment by saying white supremacy. That's what they start off saying, so people think that you're legit. Just say white supremacy and they'll be listening to you because they think that you're on the level. And then you immediately switch to the bullcrap feminist talking points. Because anti-black racism is no worse and hence no more important than homophobia or transphobia or disability phobia. Remember, family, feminism is part of white supremacy. The feminists themselves arose out of the white left. They love white supremacy as much as their male counterparts. Their only problem is they want to hold the whip. But no matter how tough a game the white feminists may talk, they're totally devoted to white supremacy. Whenever white supremacy is under threat, the white feminists disappear. Soon as you put pressure on white daddy, all these white feminists out here circle the wagons to protect them. They don't do what the Tiffany Cross-Eyes and the Zerlinas and the Joy Reids and the Root do. They don't do what they do and start attacking white men. Hell no, they circle the wagons for them. But my major overarching point is you make sure you continue to listen to and to support the black media. We are your voice. Without us, the rot would be posting this crap and people would be saying, well, this must be the black opinion because after all, nobody else is saying anything differently. Ever since we came on the scene, these guys have been gnashing their teeth because they can't match what we do. And that's because of you. Whether it be myself or TBA or Tariq or Tarian Rain, Vicky Dillard, Your World, there's a number of folks who are in our orbit. There's a number of responsible voices that have arisen in the last 15 to 10 years inside of this space. You got these big white corporations like Geo Media who are putting money behind these fools, but they're just throwing cash down a well. Because all that white media money may be able to give them a platform. It might be able to give them reach. But the one thing it will never give them is legitimacy. And that's why the hell they're mad at Dave Chappelle so much. They're looking and going, well, white daddy's got all that money and they ain't done us a damn bit of good. They're deranged. That's the reason why they're bootlicks. These clowns are on a suicide mission, by the way. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of kamikaze clowns here. As far as these puppets are concerned, there's no downside for them to be towing the line for white supremacy. After all, black society doesn't want them. This is the only play they've got, so they might as well go all in. They might as well lie and lie big, and why not? There's really no downside for these bootlick puppets for the white media to lie. Because while Dave Chappelle's high school has not distanced itself from him, black society long ago distanced itself from the rot. Good day, and be one. Black media only exists because of you. So if you like the kind of uncompromising commentary and insight that you get from places like this, then be sure to hit us up on Cash App. And don't forget to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that.